the sermon that's in your bulletin is not the sermon you're going to get. It has an addendum. If you want a full copy of it, I made some copies and left them on the little table on the way to the fellowship hall. A lot of it will sound familiar, but the end is different. I have always been intrigued by the soon-to-become disciples' reaction to Jesus' misleadingly simple invitation. Some young man comes up to you as you're putting away your fishing nets or mending them or hoping for some fish, and he says, "Follow me and I will make you fish for people," and they go. They left everything. Simon was married. He left his mother-in-law, maybe even his wife, and home. We don't know if the others had families, but all four were told immediately dropped what they were doing and followed Jesus. What was so appealing or magnetic about Jesus that you would just drop everything and go? What if I said to you right this minute, drop your life as it is right now? Leave your home, your friends, your partner, your work, your hobbies, leave all of it, and come follow this itinerant preacher where there is no promise of money or even regular meals or shelter. If I said that to you, what would you say back to me? Yeah, I think there would be some interesting remarks made. But it's interesting to think about, isn't it? The writer of Matthew told us that Jesus was new to this area, that he had just left Nazareth and had settled in Capernaum. So it's not likely that the fishermen had witnessed anything he'd done or had even met him before. Maybe they'd heard rumors of this new preacher, this new teacher. Or maybe they were really tired of being fishermen. I mean, at least fishing for people would probably be a whole lot less stinky than the fish had been. But that is such a huge change to make, and such huge connections to break, to drop all that you know and go follow this man. What called them to do it? And I also wonder, what were their reactions when the crowds began to show up? People coming from miles around, bringing every kind of afflicted person to Jesus to be cured. What would it be like to hear about Jesus and sense the appeal within him? What would it be like to go from that to the reality of the crowds and the noise and the pushing or yelling or just the sheer mess that comes from illness? What would that have been like? Did the newly named disciples wonder what they'd gotten themselves into? Were they frightened by all those demanding souls? What kept them from leaving? From thinking, whoa, this is just too weird or too much for me, and heading on back home to what they knew? I think this is a useful question to ask at this time in the long historical flow of Christianity, because the church, as you and I have known it, is shrinking on a worldwide scale. Despite what you might hear or witness about mega churches, on the whole, the traditional church is shrinking. We who come here on a Sunday morning, we are doing a radical thing in these modern times. We're setting aside a couple of hours once a week to set our minds and hearts on the holy. We are saying no thank you to the invitations to brunch, or to sports, or to online meetings, or trainings, or to reading our latest book, so we can be here. We are choosing to live a life of sharing our resources and praying and paying attention. We are choosing the way of Christ at a time when more and more people are giving up on this way, deciding that it's no longer useful or plausible or helpful or even sacred. What keeps you here? What brings you here? And what keeps you here when there's so many other possible places to be? In some ways, that is just as intriguing a question as why four fishermen would toss their livelihoods, in fact their whole world aside, and follow Christ. Now, for some of us, the reason we're here is a kind of social conditioning. You grow up going to church. You found the habit helpful, and so now you continue it. I didn't grow up going to church, so that's not part of my story. I began going to church because it seemed to offer the only sane voice in a wacky world. In a world that values success and doesn't care much about those who come in second, let alone those who fail. In a world that values health and youth and doesn't care much about those who are sick or old. In a world that demonstrably thinks it's okay to demean others, to make fun of people, to be hurtful or hateful, to pigeonhole people into little limited our world, I hear the church saying, you matter. All of you matter. God values all of creation, and guess what? That includes you. And I hear the church saying, how we go forward is as community, not as competing individuals divided into winners and losers. The church says we go forward as community, together. Like Jesus taught, we go forward together. That to me is a sane voice, a wise voice, a needed and necessary voice. I get it. It makes sense to me. And maybe that is what called out to the four fishermen who had nothing beyond a lifetime of nets, boats, and fish ahead of them. What they saw in Jesus was maybe a way forward that was more about us, about everyone, about how God's love is for us all and surrounds us all, a way that was not so much about individual effort or power or resource. Then our four fishermen got hit with the reality of what that compassion and inclusion meant. Crowds of people swarming to Jesus, bringing all the brokenness of their lives, all the mess of illness and fear and disappointments in treatments that had not worked, and worries that escalated as the illness worsened. People who had been isolated, cut off from their community. Messy human pain. Because compassion and mercy sound lovely, but the lived reality is actually a confusing jimble-jamble of pain and mess and frustration and demand, and it is hard. Living in the midst of hurting and desperation is hard and not very lovely. But the disciples stuck with it. They did become fishers of people. They worked alongside Jesus in whatever way they could. Maybe it was just handing someone a cup of water. But to that person, what that cup must have meant. What does it mean for us to say yes to Jesus' invitation, to come and follow him? I stand with what I wrote earlier this week, that it means that we recognize and accept that God loves us, all of us. And I stand with what I wrote earlier this week, that saying yes to Jesus means we say yes to stepping into the messy, difficult, and dangerous work of being community. But not the kind of community where we all go along to get along. No. We are called to be active participants in community, holding one another accountable, challenging one another when we sense that someone's moral compass has gone awry. Not to be mean, not to be threatening, not to be hurtful, but to raise the important questions of what makes for justice. What does mercy look like? How do we respect the dignity of every person? And right now, there isn't much of a forum for that kind of straightforward conversation. Because right now, there are masked persons, endorsed and enabled by our government, who are using violence, who are killing people, simply because they can. There are government officials who tell blatant lies, and the ones who could compel them to tell the truth are noticeably silent. And somehow, we are to be disciples in the midst of this. What does that look like? Each of us has to wrestle with that question. Each of us has to decide what it means to be a disciple of Jesus right now. But to the extent that I know anything, I know that killing people is wrong. I know that using a child to get at a parent is wrong. I know that committing a misdemeanor is not the same as committing a felony, and to overstay your visa is only a misdemeanor under the law. And no petty crime gives someone the right to follow you in an unmarked car, or enter your home without a warrant, or snatch you off the street because you happen to be brown or speak with an accent. I know that spraying chemicals in the face of a person who is utterly immobilized is wrong. I know that describing a peaceful, nonviolent protest as a riot is deceitful at best and incendiary at the least. I know that saying your nation needs to take over another nation so you feel secure is dangerous and wrong. I know that insulting your neighbors to puff up your own self-importance is wrong. And as I know those things are wrong, I must speak up and out,
Oh,
because my Lord tells me I need to. Jesus spoke truth to power. He overturned the money changers' tables in the temple and chased the offering animals out. He argued with the Pharisees and the religious authorities. He called out those who told lies. He stood on the side of those who were being oppressed by those in power. And through it all, he spoke of God as love, as loving each and every person, despite what some might say, despite the stories that some might tell. We are living into a time where our discipleship is going to get a tough workout. We cannot sit on the sidelines and say, well, every age has its challenges, or this too shall pass. No, I'm convinced that we are called to action, to protest, to be vigilant, to care for our neighbors in ways that we have never done before. And our discipleship may very well bring us to our death. No exaggeration. The evil in our world is playing dirty and for really high stakes. This is not an easy time. We aren't that different from those early first recruits who were attracted by Jesus and then may be overwhelmed by the chaos and craziness of all who came to Jesus for help and for hope. We too may be feeling overwhelmed, scared, utterly freaked out. I know I am. But if we're going to follow Jesus, if we too are going to hang up that sign that says, "Gone fishing," these are the commitments we have to take on. We cannot be silent in the face of our neighbor's pain. We cannot be silent in the face of our government's lies. We cannot be silent. I pray to God that I will be courageous enough to put that "Gone fishing" sign on my door, that I will walk my faith out into the world. I pray that you will have that courage too. Because right now the world really needs us to go fishing, to build God's kingdom of peace, justice, mercy, and community with each sentence we speak, each step we take,